Marcus Chen finished his morning coffee and stared out the window of his small apartment. The rain drummed against the glass, matching his mood. 10 years of working at the same mining station on Europa had made every day feel the same. He was 32 now, older and more tired than he felt he should be. His communication device buzzed. Marcus glanced at it, expecting another work notification. Instead, the screen showed an incoming transmission from an unknown source. The signal strength was massive, far beyond anything his basic equipment should pick up. Transmission incoming from vessel designation unknown. Do you accept? The automated voice asked. Marcus hesitated. Unknown vessels near Jupiter's moons usually meant trouble, pirates, smugglers, or worse, but curiosity won over caution. Accept, he said. The screen flickered, then cleared to show a face that made Marcus drop his coffee mug. It shattered on the floor, but he barely noticed. The woman on the screen had bright blue skin that seemed to shimmer with its own light. Her hair was silver white, flowing like liquid mercury, but her eyes were what stopped his heart. They were the same gentle brown eyes he remembered from 10 years ago, though now they held a confidence and authority that hadn't been there before. Hello, Marcus, she said, her voice carrying the same musical quality he remembered. I told you I would find a way to repay you. Marcus sank into his chair. Zara? She smiled, and it was like watching a sunrise. I am Queen Zara Lynn of the Ethereal Dominion now. But yes, I am still the girl you saved. The transmission quality was perfect, better than anything Marcus had ever seen. Behind Zara, he could glimpse what looked like a massive ship's bridge. Figures in elaborate uniforms moved in the background, but his attention stayed fixed on her. This is impossible, Marcus whispered. You were just a kid, a refugee. How are you a queen? 10 years changes everything, Marcus. But I never forgot what you did for me, what you risked. Zara's expression grew serious. I am here because I need your help. More than that, my people need your help. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm a mining technician on a dead moon. What could I possibly do for a queen? You are Marcus Chen, the human who saved my life when no one else would. The man who gave me hope when I had none. The person who showed me that some beings will do right simply because it is right. Zara leaned forward, her eyes intense. That is exactly what I need. The mining station's alarm suddenly began blaring. Marcus looked up in confusion as red lights flashed throughout his apartment. Unknown massive vessel detected, the station's AI announced. All personnel report to emergency stations. Through his window, Marcus saw his co-workers running across the station's courtyards. In the distance, against the black of space, he could make out something that defied description. It was a ship, but unlike anything he had ever seen. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, stretching across the sky like a floating city. That's your ship? Marcus asked. My flagship, Zara confirmed. The luminous dawn. I'm sorry for the alarm. My arrival was more dramatic than intended. Marcus stood and walked to the window. The ship was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the entire mining station. Energy patterns danced across its hull like living light. Why are you really here, Zara? My people are at war, Marcus. We face an enemy that seeks to destroy not just us, but every thinking species in this galaxy. They call themselves the Void Reapers, and they consume entire worlds. Zara's voice carried pain and determination. We have been fighting them for 3 years. We are losing. Marcus turned back to the screen. And you think I can help with that? I'm nobody special. You are wrong. Zara stood, and Marcus could see she wore robes that seemed to be made of starlight itself. Do you remember what you told me when you found me in that crashed ship? When I was bleeding and scared and certain I was going to die? Marcus did remember. It had been the worst storm Europa had seen in decades. He had been checking the mining equipment when he spotted the crash. Most people would have reported it to the authorities and waited. Instead, he had climbed down into that twisted wreckage and pulled out a blue-skinned girl who couldn't have been more than 16. I told you that as long as there was breath in my body, I wouldn't let anything happen to you, and you kept that promise. For 3 days you hid me from the authorities who would have turned me over to the slavers hunting me. You shared your food, your shelter, your warmth. When I was delirious with fever, you stayed awake to care for me. Zara's eyes glistened with unshed tears. But more than that, you treated me like a person when everyone else saw me as a thing. Marcus remembered those 3 days clearly. They were some of the hardest of his life, but also some of the most meaningful. Zara had told him stories of her world, of crystalline cities that sang in the wind and forests that glowed with bioluminescent life. In return, he had told her about Earth, about baseball and pizza and the smell of rain on hot pavement. When you helped me get to that transport ship, I made you a promise, Zara continued. I said I would find a way to repay your kindness. This is that way. I don't understand. My people have a prophecy. It speaks of a warrior who will come from beyond the stars when our darkest hour approaches. One who fights not for glory or conquest, but because it is right. One who sees the value in every life. Zara stepped closer to the camera. I believe that warrior is you, Marcus. I believe humans are the key to saving us all. Marcus stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Outside, the mining station's security forces were mobilizing, though their weapons would be useless against a ship like Zara's. You want me to leave everything and join your war? I want you to be yourself. The same man who saved a frightened girl in a storm. My people need to see that humans exist, that there are beings who will stand up for others without asking for reward. Zara's voice softened. And I need my friend beside me in this fight. Marcus closed his eyes. 10 years of routine, of safety, of loneliness. Against that, an impossible request from someone who had never left his thoughts. He opened his eyes and looked at Zara, seeing both the scared girl he had once protected and the powerful queen she had become. Give me 5 minutes to pack. 10 years earlier, Europa's surface was locked in the grip of the worst methane storm anyone could remember. Marcus Chen pulled his environmental suit tighter as he checked the mining equipment one last time. At 22, he was the youngest technician on the station, but also the most dedicated. While others stayed inside during the storm, Marcus knew the equipment needed monitoring. The wind howled across the frozen surface, carrying clouds of methane snow that limited visibility to just a few meters. Marcus was heading back to the station when he saw the light streaking across the dark sky. At first he thought it was lightning, but the trajectory was wrong. It was falling. The crash came 30 seconds later. The ground shook beneath his feet and a pillar of fire erupted from beyond the next ridge. Marcus grabbed his emergency beacon and started running toward the crash site. His supervisor's voice crackled through his comm system. Chen, where are you? Get back to the station immediately. There's been a crash, Marcus reported, breathing heavily as he climbed the ridge. Someone might need help. Negative. Return to base. We'll send a recovery team when the storm passes. That could be hours. If someone's hurt, they'll be dead by then. That's not your responsibility, Chen. Get back here now. Marcus reached the top of the ridge and saw the wreckage below. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. Instead of the blocky, functional designs humans used, this vessel was curved and elegant, like it had been grown rather than built. It was also completely destroyed. I'm going down there, Marcus said into his comm. Chen, that's a direct order. Return to base. Marcus reached up and switched off his communicator. The descent down the ridge was treacherous in the storm, but Marcus had grown up in the asteroid belt. He knew how to move in low gravity and hostile environments. The closer he got to the wreck, the more amazed he became. The hull seemed to be made of some kind of biometallic material that shifted color even as he watched. Then he heard it. A voice calling for help in a language he didn't recognize. But the desperation was universal. Marcus followed the sound to a section of the ship that had been torn open like a flower. Inside, he found her. The girl couldn't have been more than 16. Her skin was blue, not painted or diseased, but naturally blue like a summer sky. It was beautiful and completely alien. She was trapped under a piece of debris, and blue blood flowed from a gash on her forehead. When she saw Marcus, her eyes went wide with terror. She started speaking rapidly in her own language, holding up her hands defensively. Hey, it's okay, Marcus said, raising his own hands to show he was unarmed. I'm here to help. The girl stared at him, her breathing rapid and shallow. Marcus could see she was going into shock. He needed to act fast. Moving slowly, Marcus approached the debris pinning her legs. It was heavy, but the low gravity of Europa worked in his favor. He braced himself and lifted, grunting with effort. When I lift this, you need to pull yourself out, he said, not knowing if she understood. The girl seemed to grasp his intent. When Marcus heaved the debris up, she scrambled backward, crying out in pain as her injured leg dragged across the ground. Marcus let the debris fall and immediately knelt beside her. Her leg was broken, but not severely. The head wound was more concerning. Can you understand me? He asked. To his surprise, she nodded. Little, she said in heavily accented English. You Help. Why? Because you needed help, Marcus replied, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. The girl stared at him like he had just said something incomprehensible. Marcus activated his emergency beacon and started treating her wounds with the first aid supplies from his toolkit. The girl watched his every movement, flinching when he cleaned her cuts but not pulling away. "My name is Marcus," he said as he worked. "What's yours?" "Zara," she whispered. "Nice to meet you." "Zara, we're going to get you somewhere safe." That was when the security drones arrived. Marcus looked up to see 3 enforcement drones hovering above the wreck, their scanners painting red dots across the scene. "Attention," one of them announced. "Step away from the alien. Remain in position for questioning." Marcus felt Zara grab his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Please," she whispered. "They take me." "Bad things happen." Marcus looked into her eyes and saw pure terror. Whatever these drones represented to her, it was worse than death. "Unknown alien vessel contains no salvageable technology," another drone reported. "Survivor appears to be a juvenile ethereal. Recommend immediate detention for processing." "Processing?" Marcus asked. "Ethereal refugees are considered property under Imperial Decree 247, the first drone explained. "This specimen will be transported to the nearest processing facility for evaluation and sale." Sale. They were talking about slavery. Marcus stood up, placing himself between the drones and Zara. "She's injured and scared," he said. "She needs medical attention, not processing. Step aside, citizen. This matter does not concern you." "I found her. She's under my protection." The drones paused, probably consulting their programming. Marcus knew he was on thin legal ground, but ethereal law wasn't well defined this far out in human space. "You have no legal claim to this property," the lead drone finally said. "Property?" Marcus felt anger building in his chest. "She's a person." Incorrect. Imperial classification defines ethereals as subsentient. Marcus looked down at Zara, who was watching the exchange with growing fear. Her eyes met his, and he saw intelligence there, and hope, and a dozen other emotions that were definitely not subsentient. "Go ahead and scan her," Marcus said. "Full medical and psychological evaluation. If your scans show she's subsentient, I'll step aside." The drones hummed as they processed this request. Marcus was gambling that their scans would show exactly what he saw. A frightened, intelligent girl who deserved help, not enslavement. "Scanning," the lead drone announced. Beams of light played over Zara as the drones conducted their evaluation. Marcus held his breath. "Scan complete. Subject shows neural activity consistent with full sentience. Emotional range and cognitive capacity exceed Imperial baseline for protected persons." Marcus smiled. "Then she's not property. She's a refugee seeking asylum." The drones were silent for a long moment. "This matter requires human arbitration. Temporary custody will be assigned to the individual who discovered the subject until formal ruling can be made." "How long will that take?" "Current backlog suggests 72 standard hours. 3 days. Marcus could work with that." As the drones flew away, Zara looked up at Marcus with something approaching worship. "You saved me," she said. "We're not safe yet," Marcus replied. "Can you walk?" With his help, Zara managed to stand. Marcus supported most of her weight as they made their way back toward the mining station. But instead of heading for the main complex, he led her to the old maintenance shelter he had converted into a workshop. For the next 3 days, Marcus hid Zara from the authorities while her injuries healed. He shared his food, gave her his bed while he slept on the floor, and spent hours talking with her as she recovered. Zara told him about her homeworld, a place of incredible beauty where her people lived in harmony with their environment. She explained how the war had started, how her family had died, how she had escaped in a stolen ship. Marcus told her about Earth, about human dreams and struggles. He showed her pictures of his family, explained human customs, shared stories of humanity's own difficult journey to the stars. On the 3rd day, a transport ship arrived to take Zara to a refugee center in the outer colonies. As they prepared to part ways, she took his hands in hers. "I will never forget your kindness," she said. "Someday I will find a way to repay you." "Just be safe," Marcus replied. "Make a good life for yourself, I promise," Zara said. "And I promise something else. When I am strong enough, I will come back. You showed me that there is goodness in the universe. I want to help others see it too." Marcus watched the transport ship disappear into space, carrying with it the most remarkable person he had ever met. He never expected to see her again. He was wrong. The years after Zara's departure passed slowly for Marcus. He threw himself into his work, becoming the best mining technician the Europa station had ever seen. His supervisors noticed his dedication and offered him promotions to better positions on other worlds. But Marcus always declined. Something kept him tied to this small, cold moon. Every few months, Marcus would receive news updates about the outer colonies. He watched for any mention of ethereals or refugees, hoping for some word about Zara's fate. The reports were rarely good. The galaxy was becoming a more dangerous place. 3 years after the rescue, Marcus learned about the ethereal civil war. Their homeworlds had been attacked by an unknown enemy, and the survivors were scattered across the galaxy. Most became slaves or outcasts. The lucky ones found refuge in the outer territories. Marcus wondered if Zara was among the lucky ones. 5 years after her departure, reports began filtering in about a new ethereal leader. Someone was uniting the scattered refugees, building them into something more than just survivors. The human authorities paid little attention to what they considered alien politics, but Marcus followed every story he could find. The leader was called the Silver Princess, and she was said to be young but incredibly wise. She spoke of hope and unity, of turning their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. Under her guidance, the ethereal refugees began building new settlements, new ships, new lives. Marcus allowed himself to hope it might be Zara, but the description seemed too grand, too important for the frightened girl he had hidden in his workshop. 7 years after the rescue, the Silver Princess became Queen Zarlin of the newly formed ethereal dominion. Marcus's heart stopped when he heard the name. It had to be her. The news reports described a remarkable transformation. In just 4 years, Queen Zarlin had turned a collection of refugee camps into a thriving interstellar nation. The ethereal dominion controlled 12 star systems and was recognized as a sovereign power by most major governments. Marcus tried to send messages through diplomatic channels, but they were lost in bureaucracy. How do you contact a queen to say, "Hi, remember me? I hid you in my shed once." Meanwhile, his own life remained frustratingly ordinary. He dated occasionally, but never seriously. His family on Earth urged him to visit, but he always found reasons to stay on Europa. His friends worried he was wasting his life on a dead rock, but Marcus couldn't explain the feeling that kept him there. He was waiting for something, though he couldn't say what. 8 years after the rescue, dark rumors began spreading through the human colonies. Ships were disappearing near the galactic rim. Entire planets went silent overnight. The few survivors who escaped spoke of creatures that consumed light itself, beings that turned living worlds into empty husks. The human government dismissed these reports as hysteria and alien propaganda. Humans had always been skeptical of threats they couldn't see with their own eyes. But Marcus remembered Zara's stories about her homeworld's destruction and the fear in her eyes when she described the attackers. She had never given them a name, but her description matched what the survivors were reporting. 9 years after the rescue, the attacks reached human space. The colony of New Vermont simply vanished. One day it was sending regular communications. The next day there was nothing but empty space where a thriving world had been. The human fleet sent to investigate found no trace of the planet or its 3 billion inhabitants. Within months, 6 more human worlds suffered the same fate. The government finally admitted they were facing an unknown enemy of immense power. They called it the Void Crisis. Marcus watched the news reports with growing dread. The enemy was moving steadily inward, consuming everything in their path. Estimates suggested they would reach the inner colonies within 2 years. The human military mobilized everything they had, but their weapons seemed useless against an enemy that could devour entire worlds. Traditional tactics meant nothing against beings that existed outside normal physics. 10 years after the rescue, Marcus received a priority communication from Earth. His sister Elena appeared on the screen, her face tight with worry. "Marcus, you need to get out of there," she said. "The things, whatever they are, they just took the Titan colonies. Europa is right in their path." Marcus looked out his window at the ice fields that had been his home for so long. "Where would I go? They're everywhere. Come home to Earth. At least there, we have the main fleet protecting us. The fleet hasn't stopped them anywhere else. Elena was quiet for a moment. Marcus, I know you've been waiting for something out there. Mom told me about the girl you helped, but she's not coming back. You need to save yourself. After ending the call, Marcus sat in his darkened apartment and thought about Zara. Was she fighting these creatures? Was she even still alive? The ethereal dominion had gone completely silent 6 months ago. That night, Marcus dreamed about the crash site. But instead of finding Zara in the wreckage, he found emptiness. A void that consumed light and hope and everything that made life worth living. He woke with the certainty that the enemy Zara had fled 10 years ago was the same force now destroying human space. And somehow he knew she was still fighting them. Marcus began making preparations. He updated his will, sent messages to his family, and organized his few possessions. If the Void Reapers came to Europa, he wouldn't run. This was where Zara had found hope when she had none. If this was where his story ended, at least it would be in a place that had seen goodness triumph over darkness. But even as he prepared for the worst, part of Marcus still believed Zara would keep her promise. She had said she would find a way to repay his kindness. She had said she would come back when she was strong enough. As reports came in of the enemy fleet approaching Jupiter space, Marcus found himself checking the communications array more often. Not for evacuation orders or military updates, but for something else. He was still waiting. The attack on Europa was scheduled to begin in 72 hours when Marcus's communication device buzzed with an incoming transmission from an unknown source. The signal strength was massive, far beyond anything his basic equipment should pick up. Marcus stared at the device, his heart racing. After 10 years of waiting, something told him his vigil was finally over. He reached for the accept button, knowing his life was about to change forever. Transmission incoming from vessel designation unknown. Do you accept? The automated voice asked. Marcus smiled for the first time in months. Accept. While Marcus waited on Europa, Zara's journey from refugee to queen had been anything but easy. After leaving the mining station, she spent months in overcrowded refugee camps on the outer rim. The conditions were harsh, but they gave her something invaluable: perspective on how the galaxy truly worked. Most aliens saw ethereals as beautiful but weak, useful as servants or decorations but never as equals. The few humans she encountered either ignored her completely or treated her with casual cruelty. But she carried Marcus's kindness like a light in the darkness, proof that some beings could see beyond species and circumstances. In the camps, Zara learned that her people were dying slowly. Not from violence or disease, but from despair. The ethereals had always been a peaceful species, dedicated to art and harmony. When the Void Reapers destroyed their worlds, they took more than just lives and cities. They took hope itself. Zara began speaking to other refugees, sharing the stories Marcus had told her about humanity's struggles and triumphs. She talked about a species that had fought wars, survived disasters, and kept pushing forward no matter how dark things became. But humans are different from us, an elder named Kethvar told her. They are naturally aggressive. We are not warriors. Neither was I, Zara replied. But a human taught me that being a warrior isn't about being violent. It's about refusing to give up when others need you. Slowly, Zara began changing how her people saw themselves. Instead of viewing their peaceful nature as weakness, she helped them understand it as strength. The ethereals didn't need to become human to survive. They needed to become the best version of themselves. Her first real test came when slavers attacked the camp on Meridian Station. The raiders expected easy prey, scared refugees with no weapons or military training. They found Zara instead. She stood alone between the slavers and the refugee children, holding nothing but a broken piece of metal from a damaged ship. The raiders laughed at the young ethereal girl who thought she could stop them. That laughter died when Zara began to glow. Ethereals had always possessed natural bioluminescence, but it was typically just a soft shimmer of skin. Under extreme emotional stress, however, they could channel their life force into brilliant light. The ability was dangerous and rarely used, as it could burn out their nervous systems. Zara blazed like a star, her light so intense it overloaded the slavers' electronic equipment and temporarily blinded their augmented vision. In the chaos that followed, the refugees escaped while station security arrived to handle the disabled raiders. The incident made Zara famous among ethereal refugees. But it also caught the attention of the Void Reapers. The attack came 2 months later. Zara was visiting another refugee camp when space itself seemed to tear open above the planet. Ships emerged from the wound in reality, but they were wrong in every way possible. They absorbed light instead of reflecting it, moved in patterns that hurt to watch and seemed to exist in more dimensions than the eye could process. The Void Reapers descended on the planet like a plague. Wherever they touched, life simply ceased. Plants withered, animals collapsed, and the very air became toxic. Most horrifying of all, they converted some of the population into extensions of themselves, turning the victims into hollow-eyed servants. Zara managed to evacuate 3,000 refugees before the planet fell completely. But she watched millions die in a matter of hours, their life force consumed to feed the Reapers' endless hunger. That night, as her refugee convoy fled through hyperspace, Zara made a decision. Running wasn't enough anymore. If her people were going to survive, they needed to fight back. But fighting the Void Reapers required more than courage. It required understanding them, and what Zara learned filled her with cold dread. The Reapers weren't invaders from another galaxy. They were invaders from another reality entirely, beings that existed in the spaces between dimensions. They had been trying to enter this universe for millennia, but the barriers between worlds had kept them out. Until something changed. Zara's research led her to discover that the barriers had been weakened by massive psychic trauma in this galaxy. Billions of beings dying at once, entire species wiped out in wars. The collective pain and despair of countless civilizations had created cracks in reality itself. The Reapers fed on negative psychic energy, growing stronger with each world they consumed. Every death, every moment of terror or despair gave them more power to tear wider holes between dimensions. Traditional weapons were useless against them because they could shift between realities at will. Energy weapons passed through them harmlessly. Projectile weapons found nothing to hit. And even nuclear fire couldn't damage beings that existed partially outside normal space-time. But Zara remembered something Marcus had told her during those 3 days in his workshop. He had talked about human history, about how they had survived their worst disasters not through superior technology, but through hope and cooperation. The funny thing about humans, he had said, is that we get more stubborn when things get worse. Tell us something can't be done and we'll find a way to do it anyway. That was when Zara realized the Reapers had a weakness. They fed on despair, but positive emotions had the opposite effect. Hope, courage, love, and determination created psychic energy that was toxic to them. The problem was that most species, when faced with world-ending monsters, experienced terror instead of hope. But Zara had seen how one human had refused to abandon a stranger in need. If she could help others find that same courage, that same determination to do what was right regardless of the cost, she might be able to turn the tide. This revelation began Zara's transformation into a true leader. She started uniting not just ethereal refugees, but survivors from dozens of species. Her message was simple. Despair feeds the enemy, but hope can destroy them. Under her guidance, the refugee coalition began developing new tactics. Instead of trying to outrun the Reapers, they started fighting back using coordinated psychic resistance. Groups of survivors would focus their will and determination into concentrated beams of positive energy, creating weapons that could actually harm the interdimensional invaders. The first successful battle came at the siege of Callus Prime. 20,000 refugees, led by Zara, stood against a Reaper fleet that had already consumed 17 worlds. By maintaining their hope and fighting as one unified force, they actually drove the enemy back. That victory marked the birth of the ethereal dominion, with Zara as its queen. More importantly, it proved the Reapers could be beaten, but as the dominion grew stronger, so did the Reaper response. They began targeting the sources of hope itself, sending assassination fleets after Zara and her key allies. They corrupted entire star systems with despair-inducing psychic fields. Worst of all, they started converting captured leaders into Reaper agents, using familiar faces to spread hopelessness among the resistance. The war had been raging for 3 years when Zara made a startling discovery. The Reapers' main invasion force was still trapped in their home dimension, held back by the remaining barriers between worlds. The creatures they had been fighting were just scouts, perhaps 1% of the enemy's true strength. The barriers were weakening steadily, and the Reaper's main force would break through within months. When that happened, no amount of hope or courage would be enough to stop them. Zara needed a miracle. She needed something that could strengthen the psychic barriers and turn the tide permanently. She needed humanity. Humans were unique among galactic species. Where others had evolved beyond their aggressive instincts, humans had retained a perfect balance of cooperation and stubbornness. They could work together when necessary, but they never stopped fighting when they believed in something. More importantly, humans generated massive amounts of positive psychic energy without even realizing it. Their literature was full of stories about ordinary people becoming heroes. Their history was packed with examples of individuals sacrificing themselves for strangers. They had an almost supernatural ability to find hope in hopeless situations. If Zara could convince humanity to join the fight, their combined psychic force might be enough to seal the dimensional barriers permanently. But there was a problem. The human government was notoriously xenophobic and isolationist. They barely acknowledged alien species existed, let alone cooperated with them. Zara needed a way to reach humanity that bypassed official channels. She needed someone humans would trust. Someone who could speak to their best instincts instead of their worst fears. She needed Marcus Chen, the young man who had saved a refugee girl 10 years ago, represented everything that made humanity special. His story was exactly what Zara needed to convince his species to fight for strangers, but more than that, she needed her friend. The war had cost Zara nearly everyone she cared about, and the weight of leading billions of refugees was crushing her spirit. She had been strong for so long that she barely remembered what it felt like to have someone simply care about her as a person. Marcus had taught her that some people would do the right thing simply because it was right. Now she needed him to help her convince an entire species to do the same. As her flagship approached Jupiter space, Marcus stepped aboard the luminous Dawn with the same 5-minute bag he had packed a decade ago when he first moved to Europa. The transport beam that brought him from the mining station was unlike anything in human technology, gentle and warm, instead of the harsh mechanical teleporters he knew. The ship's interior was breathtaking. Instead of the sterile corridors of human vessels, the walls seemed to grow from the floor in organic curves that pulsed with soft bioluminescence. The air tasted of spring flowers and carried a faint musical hum that made Marcus feel inexplicably peaceful. Ethereal crew members moved past him with fluid grace, their skin shimmering with patterns that seemed to reflect their emotions. Most nodded respectfully to Marcus, though their eyes held curiosity about the human their queen had personally summoned. "This way, please," said his escort, a tall ethereal with violet skin and silver eyes. "Her Majesty is waiting in the observation deck." As they walked through the ship, Marcus caught glimpses of the war effort. Medical bays filled with wounded from dozens of species, strategy rooms where holographic displays showed battle formations, workshops where ethereal technicians worked alongside alien engineers to develop new weapons. But what struck him most was the hope. Despite the obvious signs of a desperate war, everyone he saw moved with purpose and determination. There was none of the grim resignation he expected from a losing side. The observation deck took his breath away. The transparent dome gave a perfect view of space, and Europa looked tiny compared to the massive ship. Beyond it, Marcus could see the rest of Zara's fleet. Hundreds of vessels from dozens of different species united under her command. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Zara's voice came from behind him. Marcus turned to face the woman who had once been the frightened girl in his workshop. She was taller now, her bearing regal and confident. The simple refugee clothes were gone, replaced by flowing robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. A crown of crystalline material rested on her silver hair, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. But her eyes were exactly the same. Gentle, intelligent, and filled with warmth when she looked at him. "Hello, Zara," Marcus said. Not sure if he should bow or shake hands or what protocol applied to greeting alien queens who used to sleep on your couch. Zara solved his dilemma by stepping forward and embracing him like the old friend he was. The formal barriers of rank and species fell away, and for a moment they were just two people who cared about each other. "You look exactly the same," she said, pulling back to study his face. "Humans age differently than we do." "You've grown up," Marcus replied. "Last time I saw you, you could barely walk. Now you're commanding fleets and ruling star systems. Necessity changes us all." Zara gestured toward the viewing area, and comfortable chairs grew from the floor in response. Please sit. We have much to discuss. Marcus settled into the biomechanical chair, which adjusted itself perfectly to his body. Your message mentioned you needed help. What's really going on here, Zara? The enemy that destroyed my homeworld is called the Void Reapers. They exist between dimensions, feeding on psychic energy generated by fear and despair. For the past 3 years, I have been leading a coalition of survivors in a war for the survival of all life in this galaxy. She waved her hand, and holographic displays filled the air around them. Marcus watched in fascination and growing horror as Zara showed him battle recordings, consumed worlds, and tactical analyses of an enemy that seemed impossible to fight. They can't be hurt by conventional weapons, Zara explained. Energy passes through them. Projectiles find nothing to hit. But we discovered they can be damaged by focused positive psychic energy. Hope, courage, determination, love. These emotions create a kind of radiation that's toxic to them. So you're fighting monsters with good feelings? Essentially, yes. It sounds absurd, but it works. The problem is scale. The holographic display zoomed out to show the entire galaxy. Red areas marked Reaper-controlled space, while blue showed the territory still free. The red was winning. What we've been fighting is just their scouting force. The main Reaper army is trapped in their home dimension by psychic barriers that have protected our universe for millions of years. Marcus studied the display with growing dread. Let me guess. The barriers are failing. They weaken every time the Reapers consume another world. Every death feeds them and makes them stronger. Our projections suggest the main force will break through within 6 months. Zara's expression was grim. When that happens, the few billion survivors we've saved won't matter. They'll have enough power to consume entire star clusters. So what's the plan? How do we stop them? We need to strengthen the psychic barriers permanently. But that requires a massive coordinated effort from every thinking being in the galaxy. Zara turned to face him directly. Marcus, have you ever wondered why humans are so unique? Unique how? Most species in this galaxy have evolved past their aggressive instincts. We've learned to solve problems through cooperation and logic rather than violence. But humans retained something we lost, the ability to fight for strangers without expecting reward. Marcus frowned. I don't understand. When you found me in that wreckage, what did you gain by helping me? Nothing. You risked your job, your safety, your relationship with authority. Any logical analysis would have concluded you should report the crash and let others handle it. But you needed help. Exactly. Zara's eyes lit up with excitement. That's what makes humans special. You don't help people because it's logical. You help because it's right. That moral instinct generates massive amounts of positive psychic energy. She gestured, and new images appeared, human achievements throughout history. People risking their lives for strangers, sacrificing for future generations they would never meet, fighting against impossible odds because surrender would be wrong. Humans produce more hope-based psychic energy per capita than any known species. If we could convince your people to join the fight, their combined will might be enough to seal the dimensional barriers forever. Marcus felt the weight of what she was asking. You want me to somehow convince the human government to join an alien war based on psychic powers they don't believe in? To fight enemies they've never seen? To save species they barely acknowledge exist? I want you to help me reach the human people directly. Not through governments or militaries, but through individuals who might understand what we're fighting for. Zara leaned forward. Marcus, humanity's greatest stories are about ordinary people becoming heroes when others need them. Your species' literature, your movies, your songs, they're all about hope triumphing over darkness. Those are just stories. No, they're instruction manuals. Humans tell those stories because deep down you believe they're possible. You believe individuals can make a difference, that good can triumph over evil, that heroes exist. Zara stood and walked to the viewing wall. The Reapers can't understand that. They exist purely to consume and destroy. They can't comprehend why someone would sacrifice for strangers. Marcus joined her at the wall, looking out at the stars. And you think I can convince billions of people to risk their lives based on hope alone? I think you can show them what they're truly capable of. The same thing you showed me 10 years ago. Zara turned to him, her face serious. Marcus, the war isn't just about tactics and weapons. It's about proving that life has meaning beyond mere survival. Every world the Reapers consume, every person who dies in despair weakens our position. But every act of courage, every moment someone chooses to help rather than hide makes us stronger. What exactly are you proposing? I want you to become my ambassador to humanity. Help me make contact with your people. Show them what we're fighting for, convince them that this war matters. Zara's voice softened. But more than that, I want you to be my friend again. This war has cost me almost everyone I care about. The weight of leading billions of refugees is crushing my spirit. I need someone who remembers the girl I was, not just the queen I became. Marcus looked at her, seeing past the crown and the robes to the person underneath. She was still the scared refugee he had hidden in his workshop, but now she carried the hopes of entire civilizations. The loneliness in her eyes was heartbreaking. The human government will never officially join your coalition, he said finally. They're too xenophobic and bureaucratic, I know. And most humans won't believe stories about interdimensional monsters and psychic warfare, I know. This plan is probably impossible, I know. Zara smiled, and it was the same smile that had lit up his workshop 10 years ago. But remember what you told me when I said I'd never see my homeworld again? You said impossible just meant it hadn't been done yet. Marcus found himself smiling back. You kept that? I kept everything you taught me. About hope, about refusing to give up, about doing what's right even when it's hard. Zara extended her hand. Will you help me save our species, Marcus? Both of them? Marcus looked at her outstretched hand, thinking about the last 10 years of his quiet life on Europa. Then he thought about the stories humans told, about heroes who stepped forward when darkness threatened. Maybe those stories existed for a reason. He took her hand. Tell me what we need to do. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of trying to convince human governments, Marcus and Zara would appeal directly to the people through humanity's own communication networks. They would tell the story of how two strangers from different worlds had found friendship across the darkness, and use that connection to bridge the gap between species. Marcus spent 3 days preparing broadcasts in 12 human languages, while Zara's technicians worked to integrate their communication systems with human networks. The plan was to simultaneously transmit to every major population center on Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies. But on the 4th day, everything changed, Your Majesty. Captain Veltar burst into the strategy room where Marcus and Zara were rehearsing his speech. We're receiving distress calls from the Sol system. The Void Reapers have begun their assault on Earth. The main display activated, showing feeds from human news networks. Marcus watched in horror as familiar cities disappeared under waves of consuming darkness. The Reaper scout fleet had found Earth while the main human defenses were deployed protecting the outer colonies. They're not just attacking randomly, Zara observed, studying the tactical display. They're targeting population centers with the highest fear levels. Major cities, refugee camps, military installations under stress. Marcus felt sick as he watched his homeworld burning. How many people? Early estimates suggest 2 billion casualties in the first 6 hours, Captain Veltar reported. The human fleet is responding, but their weapons are having no effect. We have to help them, Marcus said, turning to Zara. My fleet is already moving toward Earth, she replied. But Marcus, this changes our mission completely. We no longer have time for careful diplomacy. We need to reach the survivors immediately and get them fighting back, or there won't be enough humans left to make a difference. The Luminous Dawn and her escort ships jumped to hyperspace, racing toward the Sol system. During the journey, Marcus worked frantically to modify his prepared broadcasts. Instead of careful explanations about interdimensional threats, he now had to give desperate survivors a crash course in psychic warfare. They dropped out of hyperspace to find Earth surrounded by the characteristic dimensional tiers that marked Reaper presence. The human fleet hung in space around the planet, their weapons firing uselessly at enemies that phased in and out of reality. This is Admiral Chen of the Human Defense Force, came a transmission on military frequencies. Unknown vessels, identify yourselves immediately. Marcus blinked in surprise. Admiral Chen is my brother. David? Marcus activated the communications array. David, this is Marcus. Marcus? What the hell are you doing out here? And what are those ships? It's complicated. Can you patch me through to Earth's emergency broadcast system? Are you insane? We're in the middle of an alien invasion. David, trust me. These are the good guys, and I think I know how to stop the attackers. There was a pause before David's voice returned, tight with stress. Marcus, I've lost 1/3 of my fleet in 6 hours fighting things that shouldn't exist. If you have answers, I'll listen. Within minutes, Marcus found himself broadcasting to every surviving human settlement in the Sol system. Billions of people huddled in shelters or fleeing through the chaos stopped to listen as an ordinary mining technician tried to explain the impossible. "My name is Marcus Chen," he began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was attempting. "I know what's happening seems impossible. I know you're scared and confused and angry, but I also know something about humanity that our enemies don't understand." On the screen beside him, Zara appeared, her alien beauty a stark contrast to Marcus's ordinary human appearance. 10 years ago, I was a refugee from another world, dying in a crashed ship. This man saved my life, not because he had to, but because he chose to. He showed me that some people will do the right thing simply because it's right. Marcus took over. The things attacking us feed on fear and despair. Every person who gives up hope makes them stronger. But hope makes us stronger too. I know that sounds crazy, but I've seen it work. He gestured toward the tactical displays showing the ongoing battle. Right now, those creatures think they're fighting scared animals. They don't know they're fighting humans. They don't know we have something they can never understand. Across the broadcast, Marcus told the story of humanity as Zara had taught him to see it. Not as a young species stumbling through space, but as a people who had always fought for others. He talked about firefighters running into burning buildings, about soldiers holding lines to protect civilians, about ordinary people becoming extraordinary when others needed them. "Every disaster movie you've ever watched ends the same way," he said, "not with superior technology or alien intervention, but with people choosing to help each other. That's not fiction. That's instruction." The response was immediate and visible. Across the globe, emergency networks reported sudden coordination among survivors. Instead of fleeing in panic, people began organizing rescue operations. Instead of hiding from the Void Reapers, they started standing together. And something remarkable happened. Where groups of humans gathered in determination rather than fear, the Reaper attacks faltered. The creatures that had seemed invincible began to slow down, their movements becoming sluggish. "It's working," Zara breathed, watching the sensor readings. Human psychic output just increased by 300%. But the Reapers adapted quickly. Unable to feed on human fear, they began targeting the sources of hope itself. Reaper attack formations converged on the largest human gatherings, seeking to break their spirit through overwhelming force. "They're learning," Captain Veltar warned, concentrating all forces on Population Center Alpha 7. Marcus looked at the tactical display and felt his heart sink. Alpha 7 was New Geneva, Earth's largest refugee center. Nearly 50 million people who had fled the initial attacks were gathered there, including most of Earth's government officials. If they break the resistance there, it'll spread panic across the entire planet, Zara said. "We'll lose all the progress we've made." "Then we don't let them break it," Marcus replied. "Take us down there." "Marcus, the surface is a war zone, I know, but those people need to see that someone is fighting for them, not just giving them orders through a screen." Marcus started toward the transport bay. "You taught me that hope isn't just an emotion. It's a choice. Time to help 50 million people make the right choice." The descent to Earth's surface was terrifying. Reaper creatures swarmed around the transport, their twisted forms barely visible as they phased between dimensions. But the Luminous Dawn's escort ships had learned to fight them, using concentrated psychic energy weapons developed from Zara's research. New Geneva was in chaos when they landed. The refugee center stretched for miles, a mixture of temporary shelters and hastily constructed buildings. Void Reapers moved through the crowds like sharks, their presence causing technology to fail and people to collapse in despair. But in the center of the camp, something was happening that the Reapers couldn't understand. A group of human survivors had formed a circle around the children, singing, not a war song or a funeral dirge, but a simple lullaby about hope and light conquering darkness. As Marcus and Zara approached, the singing grew louder. More people joined the circle, adding their voices to the song. The Reapers that tried to attack the group found their forms becoming less solid, their power weakening. "Amazing," Zara whispered. "They're instinctively using the same techniques it took us years to develop." Marcus stepped into the circle and added his own voice to the song. One by one, the other survivors looked at him, recognizing the man who had spoken to them from space. Recognition sparked hope, hope sparked courage, and courage became a weapon the Reapers couldn't defend against. The battle for New Geneva lasted 6 hours, but it ended with something unprecedented: a Reaper retreat. The creatures that had consumed entire worlds fled before a group of humans who refused to stop believing in tomorrow. As news of the victory spread across human space, the tide of war began to turn. The Void Reapers had expected to find another species that would break under pressure. Instead, they found humans. And humans, as Marcus had told Zara years ago, got more stubborn when things got worse. But the main Reaper force was still coming, and when they arrived, the real test would begin. The main Void Reaper fleet arrived exactly when Zara's calculations predicted, tearing through reality itself in a display that could be seen from 3 star systems away. The dimensional barrier didn't break so much as explode, unleashing creatures that made the scout force look like children's toys. Marcus stood beside Zara on the bridge of the luminous dawn, watching sensor readings that defied comprehension. The main fleet wasn't just bigger than the scouts. It was operating on a completely different scale of existence. "How many?" he asked. "Our sensors can't count them accurately. They exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously." Zara's voice was steady, but Marcus could see the fear in her eyes. "Conservative estimate? 10 billion individual entities, some of them the size of moons." The united human-alien fleet that had been so successful against the scouts looked pathetically small in comparison. 2,000 ships from a dozen species facing an enemy that could consume stars. "Status report from all sectors," Zara commanded. Captain Veltar coordinated the responses. Human resistance holding on Earth, Mars, and Titan. Ethereal battle groups maintaining position around the dimensional breach. "Our allies are ready, Your Majesty." "And the psychic resonance network?" "Online and stable." Human participation exceeded all projections. Veltar's normally stoic expression showed amazement. Marcus's broadcast reached 96% of surviving human populations. Voluntary cooperation rate is 48%. Marcus did quick math in his head. Even after the initial Reaper attacks, that meant nearly 3 billion humans were consciously participating in coordinated psychic resistance. Add in Zara's coalition of alien survivors, and they had the largest unified psychic force in galactic history. It still might not be enough. "Incoming transmission," reported the communications officer. Source appears to be the Reaper flagship. The main screen activated, showing something that hurt to look at directly. The creature speaking was vaguely humanoid but wrong in every detail. Its voice echoed from dimensions humans couldn't perceive. "We are the Entropy," it said in perfect emotionless English. "You have caused us significant inconvenience. Surrender now and your consumption will be swift." Zara stepped forward. "I am Queen Zara Lynn of the Ethereal Dominion. We will not surrender. Your resistance is illogical. We have consumed 17 galaxies. Your small alliance cannot prevent the inevitable." "Maybe not," Marcus said, moving to stand beside Zara. "But we're going to try anyway. That's what we do." The creature's attention focused on him with uncomfortable intensity. "You are human. Your species produces unusual psychic signatures. We will study you carefully before consumption." "Good luck with that," Marcus replied. "We're a difficult species to figure out." The transmission ended and the Reaper fleet began its advance. Unlike the chaotic attacks of the scouts, the main force moved with terrifying coordination. They had learned from their encounters with human resistance and adapted their tactics accordingly. "They're targeting our psychic relay stations," Captain Veltar reported. "If they break our communication network, we won't be able to coordinate the resistance." "Then we don't let them break it," Zara said. "All ships, defensive formation around the network nodes. Marcus, are you ready?" Marcus nodded, though he wasn't sure anyone could be ready for what they were attempting. The plan was simple in concept but staggering in execution. Instead of fighting the Reapers directly, they would use the combined psychic force of billions of beings to literally push them back into their home dimension and seal the barriers. Permanently, it required perfect coordination across multiple species and star systems. Every person participating had to focus on the same goal at exactly the same moment. One large-scale failure of will, one moment of despair in the wrong place, could collapse the entire effort. "Beginning Phase 1, Zara announced. "All network nodes initiate psychic resonance." Across human space, something unprecedented began. In refugee camps and military bases, in cities and space stations, Billions of humans joined their voices in a single coordinated effort. They weren't singing now. They were declaring their intention to survive, their refusal to surrender to darkness. The psychic wave that resulted was visible even to conventional sensors, a ripple of pure determination spreading out from Earth to encompass the entire solar system. Phase 2, Zara continued. Allied forces, add your resonance to the network. The ethereal survivors joined their voices to humanity's, their natural luminescence flaring as they channeled their life force into the psychic matrix. Other alien species added their own contributions: the iron will of the Khazari, the fierce loyalty of the Olthani, the unshakable hope of the Sarathi. Space itself seemed to sing as billions of minds joined in common purpose. But the Void Reapers weren't passive targets. They struck back with everything they had, pouring waves of psychic darkness across the network. Wherever their influence touched, people began to despair, to question whether their efforts mattered, to wonder if surrender might be easier. We're losing cohesion in Sector 7, reported Captain Veltar. Human resistance dropping to 30%. Marcus, Zara said urgently. They need to hear from you. Marcus activated the emergency broadcast system, speaking directly to the wavering populations. I know you're scared. I know this seems impossible. But look around you. Look at what we've already accomplished. On screens across human space, he showed them the tactical display. The Reaper advance had slowed significantly. For the first time in their existence, the creatures of entropy were meeting resistance they couldn't easily overcome. 10 years ago, a scared alien girl crashed on Europa in the middle of a storm. She was dying, alone and certain no one would help her. But someone did help because that's who we are. We help strangers. We fight for people we've never met. We do the right thing even when it's hard. The psychic resonance began to stabilize as human confidence returned. Phase 3, Zara announced. Full power psychic pulse. All participants focus on the dimensional barriers. See them healing. See them strong. See the darkness pushed back where it belongs. The combined psychic force of multiple species and billions of individuals focused on a single goal: closing the door between dimensions. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Reality itself began to repair around the dimensional breach. The wound in space-time started contracting, pulling the Reaper fleet back toward their origin point. The creatures that had seemed invincible found themselves unable to maintain their hold on normal space. But they fought back with desperate fury, pouring every ounce of their power into keeping the breach open. The psychic battle that followed could be felt across the galaxy as two fundamental forces clashed. Entropy against hope, consumption against creation. Resonance holding steady, Captain Veltar reported. But the Reapers are adapting. They're trying to corrupt our network from within. Marcus felt it too. Whispers of doubt creeping into his mind, suggestions that their effort was pointless, that they should save themselves and let others fall. He recognized the Reaper influence and pushed it away, but he could sense others succumbing to the psychic attack. Zara, he said, it's not enough. They're too strong. I know. Zara's luminescence was blazing now, her entire body channeling psychic energy. But I have one more idea. Something I've never tried before. She turned to face him directly. Marcus, what you did for me 10 years ago saved more than just my life. It saved my faith in the universe. That moment of kindness has echoed through everything I've done since then. Zara, what are you planning? Psychic energy is most powerful when it's connected to personal truth. I want you to think about that moment in the storm, when you decided to save a stranger. Think about what made you climb down into that wreckage. Marcus closed his eyes and remembered. The fear in Zara's eyes, the certainty that no one else would help, the simple knowledge that leaving her to die was unthinkable. Now, Zara continued, I want you to share that memory with everyone in the network. Show them what it feels like to choose hope over fear, action over apathy, courage over comfort. I don't know how. Take my hand. Let me show you. Marcus took Zara's hand, and suddenly his memory became part of the psychic network. 3 billion humans and billions more aliens experienced that moment on Europa. The storm, the crash, the decision to help a stranger because it was right. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Every person in the network remembered their own moments of choice, times they had helped others or been helped themselves. The psychic resonance amplified exponentially as billions of personal truths joined together. The dimensional breach began closing rapidly, pulling the Reaper fleet inexorably back into their home dimension. The creatures of entropy found themselves facing something they had never encountered: the combined moral force of species that chose creation over consumption. As the last Void Reaper disappeared through the shrinking breach, reality healed itself completely. The barriers between dimensions restored themselves stronger than before, sealed by the psychic imprint of billions of beings who had chosen to stand together. In the silence that followed, Marcus looked around the bridge of the luminous dawn. Zara's crew was exhausted but triumphant, their luminescence flickering with joy and relief. "Is it over?" Marcus asked.